You're at a backyard barbecue this weekend, standard suburban Saturday. Burgers on the grill, somebody's kid screaming about a popsicle. And you notice your neighbor, the guy in the faded polo and the 10-year-old Toyota, quietly mention that he just paid cash for his daughter's first semester of college. No financing, no loan, just wrote a check. You smile, nod, refill your drink. But on the drive home, you can't stop thinking about it because 2 streets over lives a guy with a leased Mercedes, a boat in the driveway, and a kitchen renovation that hit the local Facebook group. And somehow, you're now 90% sure the polo guy has more money than him. Way more. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about money and the weird signals people send with it. Because here's the part nobody tells you. In America, the people who look rich are usually drowning, and the people who actually have money look like they're on their way to a Lowe's. And if you can't tell the difference, you're going to spend the next 10 years trying to copy the wrong people. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and let's fix that. Sign 1. They drive something deeply, profoundly boring. Let's start with the most visible one because it's the one that breaks people's brains the fastest. The number 1 car brand among American millionaires is Toyota. Number 2 is Honda. Number 3 is Ford. The list keeps going through Subaru, Lexus, Acura, Buick, and somewhere down there eventually BMW shows up looking embarrassed. This data comes from Dave Ramsey's National Study of Millionaires, which surveyed over 10,000 actual 7-figure households, and separately from researcher Thomas Stanley, who'd spent 40 years studying the wealthy and found that 86% of luxury vehicles in this country are driven by people who are not millionaires. Read that again. 86%, which means the next time you see a brand new G-Wagon roll past you at a red light, the statistically correct emotional response is mild concern, not envy. Think about the person in your life who has driven the same Camry or RAV4 for the last decade and shrugs every time you mention they should upgrade. That shrug is wealth. They paid 28 grand cash for it in 2019 and they plan to drive it until 2031. They're not making a statement. They're just refusing to set $800 on fire every month for the privilege of impressing strangers at red lights. Sign 2, their house is shockingly normal. Sign number 2 is even more counterintuitive, and it's the single biggest financial decision most people will ever make. Stanley found that the typical American millionaire bought a home worth roughly 1.5 times their annual income. Most cap it around 3 times. Meanwhile, the average American is now stretching to buy a home worth 6 or 7 times what they make in a year. Real wealthy people understand a brutal truth. Your house controls your entire financial life. The mortgage sets your monthly floor. The neighborhood sets your social pressure. The square footage sets your insurance, your property taxes, and how much furniture you feel obligated to buy. Every dollar you commit to housing is a dollar you cannot invest, save, or use to buy your time back later. Here's the part that always shocks people. Warren Buffett, currently sitting on roughly $140 billion, still lives in the 5-bedroom stucco house in Omaha he bought in 1958 for $31,500. He calls it the 3rd best investment he's ever made, behind his 2 wedding rings. So if you can think of someone in your life who has a totally normal house in a totally normal neighborhood and shows 0 interest in moving up, that's not a lack of ambition. That is the ambition. They figured out the house was the trap and they walked around it. Sign 3. They wear absolutely nothing you'd recognize. Now flip the script and look at what they wear, because this one separates the players from the cosplayers immediately. In one of his most famous studies, Stanley surveyed actual American millionaires and found that half of them, had never paid more than $400 for a suit in their entire lives. Half had never paid more than $235 for a watch. Half had never paid more than $140 for a pair of shoes. The typical millionaire's haircut, tip included, ran about $16 at a regular barbershop. Which means somewhere out there is a guy worth $4 million wearing a JCPenney blazer and a Timex, judging your Hugo Boss situation in complete silence. You know what they're not wearing? Visible logos. They are not wrapping themselves in giant Gucci belt buckles or Louis Vuitton monogram everything. That entire aesthetic, the loud, branded, look at me luxury, is almost exclusively the territory of people climbing toward wealth or pretending to have already arrived. If you've ever wondered why the show Succession got so much attention for its quiet luxury wardrobe, unbranded cashmere, no logo baseball caps, sweaters that cost $1,800 and look like they came from Costco, that's because actual generational wealth doesn't advertise itself. The whole point is that you wouldn't know. Sign 4, they're almost always first generation. Here's a fact that completely demolishes a stereotype most people carry around without realizing it. According to Ramsey's study, 79% of American millionaires received zero inheritance. 8 in 10 built it themselves. Only 3% ever inherited $1 million or more. 80% came from middle-class or working-class families. Only 2% came from upper-income households growing up. And here's the real twist that comes from Stanley's research. The adult children of wealthy parents who get regular financial help from mom and dad end up with about 98% of the income, but only 57% of the net worth of kids who got nothing. The handouts make them poorer. They learn to consume at a level their own income can't sustain, and they spend the rest of their lives playing catch up to a lifestyle that was never theirs to begin with. Think about the wealthiest person you actually know personally, not the loudest, the wealthiest. There's a very good chance their parents drove a beat-up Ford and clipped coupons. Real wealth in this country almost always looks like a regular person who quietly out-earned, out-saved, and out-invested everyone they grew up with. They're not from money, they became money. And they usually still talk like the place they came from. Sign 5, they have a really, really boring job. This one's going to sting if you've spent your life believing prestige equals wealth. The top 5 professions in Ramsey's millionaire study in order were engineer, accountant, teacher, manager, and attorney. Doctor didn't crack the top 5. Surgeon, hedge fund manager, tech founder, none of them made the cut. 2/3 of self-made millionaires in Stanley's research ran what he called dull, normal businesses. Welding contractors, pest control companies, mobile home park owners, dry cleaners, regional auctioneers. Not glamorous, not the kind of thing that goes on a LinkedIn headline. Just boring businesses that throw off cash year after year after year. And here's the perfect example. Ronald Redd was a gas station attendant and part-time janitor in Brattleboro, Vermont. He drove a second-hand Toyota Yaris, wore a flannel jacket held together with a safety pin, and chopped his own firewood into his 90s. When he died in 2014, his neighbors found out he had quietly built an $8 million stock portfolio, $8 million, working at a gas station. He just bought blue chip companies and held them for 6 decades. So if you know a 50-year-old structural engineer who's been quietly working at the same firm for 22 years, there's a very real chance that person could buy your entire neighborhood. They just won't tell you, and you'd never guess. Sign 6. They actually know their numbers. Pause for a second. How many of these have you matched to somebody you know so far? Drop a number in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Now, let's keep going because the next batch is where it gets interesting. Wealthy people can tell you their net worth to the nearest $10,000. They know what their monthly burn rate is. They know what their savings rate is as a percentage of income. They know what their portfolio is allocated to and roughly what return they're earning. This sounds obvious until you realize that most Americans cannot answer any of those questions. According to Federal Reserve data, only about 54% of U.S. families have any retirement account at all, and the median balance for those who do is shockingly low. 80% of millionaires in Ramsey's study contributed consistently to their employer 401k. Vanguard data shows that only about 14% of all 401k participants actually max out the annual contribution limit. So if you have a friend who casually mentions they max out their 401k and a Roth IRA and an HSA, they're not just doing well. They are statistically in a tiny minority of disciplined savers, and they probably have more money than you'd ever guess. The wealthy know their numbers because the numbers are how they got there. Awareness is the entire game. /sign7, they never carry a credit card balance. 3 out of 4 millionaires in Ramsey's national study said they have never in their entire lives carried a credit card balance month to month, not once. They use the cards for points and convenience, then pay them off in full every single statement. Now, contrast that with the rest of the country. Americans collectively owe over $1.2 trillion in credit card debt right now. Average interest rate around 23%. That's not a debt you climb out of casually. That's a debt that compounds against you faster than the stock market compounds for you. Here's the deeper pattern though. It's not just credit cards. Wealthy people structurally avoid consumer debt of any kind. They don't finance furniture. They don't take out loans for vacations. They don't put a swimming pool on a HELOC. They have absorbed deep in their bones that paying interest on stuff that depreciates is just lighting money on fire while telling yourself you're being responsible. Think about the most financially stable person you know. Notice how weirdly calm they are about money, like eerily relaxed about prices and bills and unexpected expenses. It's because they're not paying anyone interest on anything except maybe a mortgage. And by the way, and this is critical, because if you're listening to this thinking, okay, but I'm 35 with credit card debt, this video isn't for me, stick with me. The next 6 signs are the ones that can actually flip your trajectory if you start now. Sign 8, they're vague about what they do. Pay close attention to this one because it's almost a telltale signature. When you ask a truly wealthy person what they do for a living, the answer is almost always vague, short, and slightly redirective. Oh, I'm in commercial real estate. I run a small business. Consulting. Then they immediately turn the question back on you. Compare that to the income statement affluent crowd, the people who look rich but aren't. Ask them what they do, and you get a job title, a company name, a year of tenure, the size of their team, and 3 name drops about their last big project. By minute 3, you know his Q4 quota. This isn't an accident. There's a concept in behavioral economics called counter-signaling. When you actually have status, advertising it is redundant. Like it's already known to the people who matter, and proving it to strangers offers you no return. It's the people in the middle of the distribution who signal hardest because they need outsiders to perceive a status they haven't fully secured. Think about the conversations you've had at parties this year. Who told you nothing about themselves and asked you everything? That's probably the wealthiest person in the room. Real money doesn't introduce itself. It can't be bothered. Sign 9, they have a side income they never talk about. Now here's one almost nobody catches. Stanley's research found that the wealthy almost always have multiple income streams running quietly in the background. A rental property here, a small dividend portfolio there, a side business their main employer doesn't know about, royalty income from something they made years ago. The IRS data backs this up. People in the top wealth brackets are roughly 4 times more likely to have 3 or more sources of income than the average household. And the key word here is quietly. They don't post about it. They don't run a course teaching you how to do it. They don't have a TikTok. The duplex they bought in 2014 has been quietly cash flowing $900 a month for 10 years, and you have no idea it exists. Think about the person in your life who works a normal job, but always seems to have options. Like they could quit tomorrow and not panic. They could take a 6-month sabbatical and not flinch. That's almost never just a high salary. There's something else running in the background. And they have zero interest in telling you what it is because the second they tell you, it becomes a topic of conversation and they didn't get there by talking about money. Sign 10, they live in the wrong neighborhood on purpose. This one is so subtle, most people miss it entirely. Wealthy people deliberately live in neighborhoods where they are at the top of the local income distribution, not the bottom. Stanley called it being the Joneses instead of chasing them. If your house is the second nicest on the block, your kids go to schools where you're surrounded by similar families, and your social pressure to upgrade is essentially zero. Compare that to the income statement affluent crowd who buy the smallest house in the most expensive zip code they can stretch into. Now their neighbors all have nicer cars, their kids' friends all take nicer vacations, the block has a quiet, constant pressure to keep up, and that pressure converts directly into spending. There's an entire body of academic research on this. Economists at the University of Chicago found that exposure to higher income neighbors directly increases your own consumption. They estimate it explains a meaningful chunk of the decline in the American savings rate over the last 40 years. Your zip code is quite literally eating your retirement. If you know somebody who could afford a fancier neighborhood and just didn't move, who looked at the McMansion development and shrugged and stayed in their perfectly fine 4-bedroom from 2014, that person figured out the cheat code, they removed the social pressure to spend, and their net worth is probably triple what you'd guess. Sign 11. They play insanely good defense. I want to tell you about two guys. The first one is Richard Fiscone, Harvard MBA, former head of Latin American operations at Merrill Lynch, the kind of resume that gets you on magazine covers. He owned an 18,000 square foot mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, 11 bathrooms, 2 elevators. In 2010, the bank foreclosed on it. Richard Fiscone, the master of the universe, went personally bankrupt. The second guy is the gas station janitor we met earlier, Ronald Redd. Same decade, $8 million in the bank when he died, never made more than minimum wage in his life. Same era, same country, opposite trajectories. The difference wasn't intelligence and it wasn't returns, it was defense. Most people think wealth comes from offense. Picking the right stock, starting the right business, catching the right trend, and offense matters, sure. But Morgan Housel makes a brilliant point in The Psychology of Money. Getting rich and staying rich are two completely different skills. Getting rich requires risk. Staying rich requires the opposite. Humility, frugality, and a slight paranoia that everything you built can be taken away from you tomorrow. Here's a stat that should haunt every retail investor in America. According to research firm Dalbar, the average equity investor underperformed the S&P 500 by over 800 basis points in 2023 alone, and has underperformed the index for 15 years running. Why? Panic selling, performance chasing, market timing. Behavior, not knowledge. The actual wealthy person buys the index and does absolutely nothing for 30 years. Real wealth holds. The crowd churns. Sign 12. They have an absurdly long time horizon. Wealthy people think in decades. Broke-looking rich people think in months. This shows up in everything they do. They invest for 30 years, they drive a car for 12, they renovate a kitchen and use it for 25 years instead of redoing it every 7. They hold the same job for 22 years and let the equity vest. They pay off the mortgage, then leave it paid off. Compounding is the entire engine of wealth, and compounding has nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do with patience and time. Warren Buffett is worth around $140 billion, but here's the kicker. Roughly 97% of his net worth was accumulated after his 60th birthday. His edge wasn't returns. His edge was that he started investing at age 10 and never stopped. And I'll be honest with you, this one took me years to internalize personally. I wanted the result by Friday too. Everyone does. We are biologically wired to want the payoff now, and the engine of wealth is specifically designed to deny you the payoff now. As the late Charlie Munger famously put it, the first $100,000 is a bitch, but you've got to do it. After that, you can ease off the gas a little. The first chunk is brutal because you're doing all the work yourself. After that, your money starts hiring more money. The wealthy understand this in their marrow. The rest of the country is still waiting for the result by Friday. Sign 13. They buy time, not stuff. This is the deepest sign. The one that, if you only remember one thing from this video, should be this one. The truly wealthy understand that the entire point of money is to buy back your time. Every single financial decision they make is filtered through one question. Does this purchase make me freer, or does it make me more obligated? A leased luxury car obligates you to a $1,200 payment for 36 months. Less freedom. A paid-off Toyota frees you to put that $1,200 into an index fund. More freedom. A $750,000 house with a giant mortgage chains you to a job you hate. A $350,000 house with a small mortgage lets you take a sabbatical, switch careers, or retire 10 years earlier. The cleanest example of this principle in human history is a man named Chuck Feeney. He co-founded Duty Free Shoppers and built a fortune of around $8 billion. By the time he died in 2023 at age 92, he had given essentially all of it away. He had about $2 million left by design. He wore a $15 plastic Casio watch his entire life. He flew coach even on long-haul international flights. When asked why he didn't wear a Rolex, he said, "Why would I? It tells the same time." His stated goal was for the last check he ever wrote to bounce. That's it. That's secretly wealthy. Knowing what enough is and being completely uninterested in playing past it, tomorrow walk through your own neighborhood and actually look at the houses. The one with the boring sedan in the driveway, the slightly overgrown hedges, the porch furniture that's been there for 9 years. Statistically, that's the one with $2 million sitting quietly inside it. The one with the new Tesla in the driveway, the manicured lawn, the just finished kitchen reno everybody on Facebook saw. That one is one missed bonus away from a difficult conversation with the bank. That is the real America, the one you can't see from the street. The whole point of being secretly wealthy is being secret about it. Because the second you signal it, you start spending it, and the second you start spending it to prove you have it, you don't have it anymore. If this hit the subscribe button so I can keep making these. Drop a comment telling me how many of these 13 signs match somebody in your life. I read every single one. And if there's a sign you think I missed, tell me that too. I'm always taking notes for the next one. I'll see you in the next one.